In 1965, a radiant blonde emerged from the English countryside to capture the hearts of millions. Julie Christie wasn't just another pretty face, she was a revolutionary force who would redefine beauty, talent, and stardom itself. At the height of her powers, when Hollywood begged at her feet and the world hung on her every word, she did the unthinkable. She walked away. Tonight, we uncover the real story behind one of cinema's greatest mysteries. Why the most celebrated actress of her generation chose silence over stardom, and what price she paid for following her heart instead of fame's relentless call. The story begins not in the glittering studios of Hollywood, but in the windswept fields of rural England. Julie Frances Christie was born on April 14, 1940, on a tea plantation in British India. But her true awakening came when her family relocated to a farm in Wales. Little did anyone know that this girl, who spent her childhood mucking through stables and chasing sheep across misty hillsides, would one day become the most coveted actress of the 1960s. At 18, Julie entered the Central School of Speech and Drama in London, carrying with her an untamed spirit that refused to be molded by conventional expectations. Her instructors were both frustrated and fascinated by this wild child who seemed to embody every emotion with breathtaking authenticity. She wasn't just acting, she was living every moment on stage with an intensity that bordered on dangerous. The breakthrough came in 1963, with Billy Liar, a black-and-white gem that would change everything. Director John Schlesinger spotted something in Julie that others had missed: a raw, magnetic vulnerability that could transform the screen. In one pivotal scene, as she runs through a railway station toward freedom, the camera captured something indefinable, something that would haunt audiences for decades to come. But it was her next role that would cement her legend. When Schlesinger cast her as Diana Scott in Darling, he unleashed a force that Hollywood wasn't prepared for. The film, a scathing critique of 1960s excess and moral emptiness, found its perfect embodiment in Christie's complex portrayal of a woman chasing fame at any cost. The irony wasn't lost on those who knew her here was an actress playing someone obsessed with celebrity, while secretly harboring deep reservations about the very world she was conquering. The Academy took notice. In 1966, Julie Christie stood on that glittering stage, clutching her Oscar for Best Actress, tears streaming down her face. But those closest to her noticed something troubling in her eyes, not triumph, but a kind of terror. Fame, she was beginning to realize, was a beautiful prison, and she was already planning her escape. The call came from legendary director David Lean, the man behind Lawrence of Arabia and The Bridge on the River Kwai. He wanted Julie for what would become the most expensive film ever made at that time, Dr. Zhivago. Little did she know that accepting this role would transform her from a promising British actress into a global phenomenon whose face would grace magazine covers from New York to Tokyo. Filming in the frozen landscapes of Spain and Finland, Julie embodied Lara Antipova with a heartbreaking authenticity that left even the most hardened crew members in tears. Her chemistry with Omar Sharif was electric, their love scenes crackling with a passion that felt almost too intimate for the camera. When Lean called to action on their first romantic scene, something magical happened. Christie disappeared entirely, replaced by a woman so deeply in love that audiences worldwide would spend decades trying to find that same consuming passion in their own lives. But the making of Zhivago revealed another side of Julie Christie: her growing discomfort with the machinery of stardom. While other actors reveled in the attention, the armies of photographers and journalists who descended on the set like locusts, Julie retreated into herself. She began arriving 2 interviews late, giving cryptic answers, and displaying a restlessness that publicists found increasingly difficult to manage. The film's release in December 1965 created a cultural earthquake. Dr. Zhivago became more than a movie, it became a shared cultural experience. Maurice Jarre's haunting theme, "Somewhere My Love Lara's Theme," topped charts worldwide, and Julie's face became synonymous with romantic tragedy. Fashion magazines declared her the new Garbo, the new Dietrich. But unlike those legends who embraced their mythic status, Julie seemed almost allergic to the adulation. In private moments between takes, those close to her noticed disturbing signs. She would stare into mirrors with a look of disconnection, as if she no longer recognized the woman staring back. The pressure of carrying a $15 million epic on her shoulders was crushing her spirit, even as it elevated her to unprecedented heights. The seeds of her eventual departure were being planted in the frozen fields where Dr. Zhivago came to life. The late 1960s belonged to Julie Christie. Fahrenheit 451, opposite Oscar Werner. Far from the madding crowd reuniting her with Terence Stamp, but Julia with George C. Scotty Troll showcased her extraordinary range, while the media created an increasingly elaborate mythology around her private life. But behind the glossy magazine covers and premiere night glamour, Julie was fighting a battle that would ultimately drive her away from everything she had worked to achieve. The pressure was relentless and suffocating. Photographers camped outside her London flat, telephoto lenses trained on her windows like weapons. Every relationship was dissected, every outfit analyzed, every public appearance scrutinized for signs of weakness or vulnerability. The woman who had once run free across Welsh hillsides now found herself trapped in a golden cage of public expectation. Her relationship with Warren Beatty became a media obsession that bordered on harassment. The paparazzi followed them to restaurants, hotels, even private homes, creating a circus atmosphere that made genuine intimacy nearly impossible. What should have been a beautiful romance between two of cinema's most magnetic personalities became a public spectacle, with every kiss and argument fodder for tabloid headlines. But it was during the filming of McCabe and Mrs. Miller with Robert Altman that Julie experienced what friends later described as her breaking point. The role of Constance Miller, a tough, independent frontierwoman, seemed tailor-made for her rebellious spirit. Yet even on location in the remote Canadian wilderness, the media circus followed. Reporters in parkas trudged through snow to ask her about her love life, her career plans, her thoughts on feminism and politics. One particularly intrusive incident haunted her for years. A photographer, desperate for a candid shot, hid in the trees during an emotional scene, clicking away as Julie poured her heart into a devastating moment of vulnerability. When she discovered the violation, those present say she broke down, completely, not crying, but shaking with a rage and despair that seemed to come from her very soul. That night, she made a phone call to her agent that would begin her gradual retreat from the spotlight. The love affair between Julie Christie and Warren Beatty wasn't just a relationship, it was a cultural phenomenon that epitomized the sexual revolution of the 1970s. Two of Hollywood's most beautiful and talented stars, their romance played out like a real-life movie, complete with passion, drama, and ultimately, heartbreak. But what the public never saw were the private moments when the weight of constant scrutiny nearly destroyed them both. They met during the filming of McCabe and Mrs. Miller, and the attraction was immediate and overwhelming. Warren, already notorious for his legendary affairs with some of Hollywood's most stunning women, found himself genuinely challenged by Julie's fierce independence and intellect. She wasn't just another conquest, she was his equal in every way, an artist as committed to her craft as he was to his. Their relationship became a feeding frenzy for the international press. Every restaurant dinner became front-page news. Every public appearance dissected for signs of engagement, marriage, or breakup. The pressure was unlike anything either had experienced, even with their previous high-profile relationships. Warren thrived on attention, but even he began to buckle under the relentless invasion of privacy. For Julie, the media circus around their romance represented everything she was growing to despise about fame. She watched in horror as their most intimate moments were commodified, their private conversations somehow leaked to gossip columnists, their genuine emotions reduced to tabloid headlines. The spontaneity and joy that had initially drawn them together began to wither under the harsh glare of public scrutiny. The breaking point came during a romantic getaway to a secluded Caribbean island. They had chosen the location specifically for its privacy, hoping to escape the photographers and reporters who had made their lives a living hell. But within hours of their arrival, paparazzi emerged from behind palm trees. Speedboats circled their beach, and helicopters buzzed overhead like mechanical vultures. Julie's reaction was swift, and Finalshay packed her bags and flew home, leaving Warren alone with the realization that their love couldn't survive in the spotlight. The end of their relationship marked a turning point for Julie. She began to understand that as long as she remained in the public eye, genuine intimacy would be impossible. Love, she realized, required privacy to flourish, something that her level of fame made nearly unattainable. In 1975, Warren Beatty approached Julie with a script that would prove to be both a creative triumph and a personal nightmare. Shampoo, his satirical look at sexual politics and moral emptiness in 1970s Beverly Hills, offered Julie a role that was uncomfortable in its proximity to her own life and relationships. The film would become a massive success, but for Christie, it represented the final straw in her increasingly troubled relationship with Hollywood. The script was brilliant, as funny, and ultimately devastating portrait of a society obsessed with sex, status, and superficiality. Julie's character, Jackie Shawn, was a wealthy, neurotic woman caught in a web of sexual and emotional complications with Warren's character, George Roundy, a hairdresser whose charm and bedroom skills have made him the most sought-after man in Beverly Hills. What made the role particularly difficult for Julie was how closely it mirrored her own complicated relationship with Warren. The fictional Jackie's desperate attempts to hold on to a man who couldn't commit, her jealousy and vulnerability masked by sophisticated detachment, all of it felt uncomfortably familiar. Director Hal Ashby pushed both actors to mine their real emotions for the performances, creating an atmosphere on set that was both electric and emotionally devastating. The film's success only amplified Julie's growing discomfort with her public persona. Critics praised her fearless performance, calling it her best work since Darling, but the acclaim came at a terrible cost. Every review seemed to dissect not just her acting but her personal life, drawing connections between her character's desperation and her own romantic struggles. The line between Julie Christie, the actress, and Julie Christie, the public figure, had become so blurred that she no longer knew where one ended and the other began. More troubling was the film's underlying message about the emptiness of a life built on image and sexual gratification. As she promoted shampoo at press conferences and premieres, Julie felt like she was living inside the very critique the film was making. She was selling her own emotional authenticity to promote a movie about the dangers of commodifying human relationships. The final blow came during the Academy Awards campaign. Despite her brilliant performance, the studio's publicity machine seemed more interested in exploiting her personal life than celebrating her artistry. Every interview became an interrogation about her relationships, her future plans, her thoughts on love and commitment. She realized with crystal clarity that she had become a product to be marketed, not an artist to be respected. By 1978, Julie Christie's disillusionment with Hollywood had reached a fever pitch, but one final role would cement her decision to step away from the spotlight forever. Warren Beatty, now both co-director and star of Heaven Can Wait, offered her a supporting role that seemed perfect for her talents. What she didn't anticipate was how the film's production would become a microcosm of everything she despised about the industry. The role of Betty Logan was smaller than what audiences expected from a star of Christie's caliber, but it offered her the chance to work with talented artists like Buck Henry and explore themes of redemption and second chances that resonated with her own spiritual searching. However, from the moment filming began, Julie felt trapped in a system that seemed designed to crush artistic authenticity in favor of commercial appeal. Warren's perfectionism, once charming in their romantic relationship, became suffocating in the professional context. Take after take, he pushed for a kind of manufactured spontaneity that felt antithetical to Julie's natural approach to acting. Where she thrived on instinct and emotional truth, he demanded calculated charm and crowd-pleasing moments. The creative friction between them crackled with unresolved personal tension. But it was the film's marketing campaign that truly horrified her. The studio, eager to capitalize on her star power and romantic history with Warren, crafted a publicity strategy that focused more on their off-screen relationship than on the film itself. Interviews were scheduled specifically to explore their chemistry. Reporters were encouraged to ask intimate questions, and photo shoots were designed to suggest romantic rekindling. The breaking point came during a particularly invasive interview with a major entertainment magazine. The journalist, more interested in gossip than craft, pressed Julie about her personal life with an aggression that left her visibly shaken. When she attempted to redirect the conversation to the film and her character's journey, she was repeatedly interrupted and asked more personal questions. That evening, she called her agent with a request that shocked Hollywood insiders. She wanted to buy out her contract and retreat from public life entirely. The success of Heaven Can Wait at the box office and its multiple Oscar nominations only reinforced her decision. As the industry celebrated what they saw as her comeback, Julie saw only confirmation that her personal pain had been successfully monetized. She had become a commodity, and the realization filled her with a rage and sadness that would take years to heal. The announcement came not with fanfare or dramatic statements, but with a quiet withdrawal that spoke volumes. In 1979, at the height of her fame and influence, Julie Christie simply disappeared. No farewell tours, no final interviews, no grand pronouncements about the state of the industry. She packed her belongings, left her agent's office for the last time, and vanished from Hollywood like a ghost returning to the shadows. The industry was stunned. Here was an actress in her prime, still devastatingly beautiful, still at the peak of her artistic powers, walking away from guaranteed stardom and millions of dollars. Scripts poured in romantic leads opposite the era's biggest stars, challenging character pieces from respected directors. Even the opportunity to develop her own projects with major studio backing. All of it was declined or ignored entirely. Those closest to her weren't entirely surprised. Friends had watched Julie grow, increasingly isolated and bitter about the price of fame. She had become a prisoner of her own image, unable to walk down a street without being mobbed, unable to have a quiet dinner without photographers materializing from nowhere, unable to love without the world dissecting every emotion. The spontaneous, joyful woman, who had charmed audiences in Billy Liar, had been slowly suffocated by the very success that had made her a legend. The retreat was methodical and complete. She sold her Hollywood Hills home, closed her production company, and severed ties with most industry contacts. The phone calls from desperate agents and producers went unanswered. Magazine editors who had made fortunes from her face found themselves unable to track her whereabouts. Paparazzi who had stalked her for years suddenly found their most valuable subject had simply evaporated. But perhaps the most telling aspect of her disappearance was its emotional toll on those who had profited from her fame. Studio executives who had treated her as a commodity suddenly realized they had lost not just a star, but an artist whose integrity and talent had elevated every project she touched. Directors who had pushed her toward more commercial choices found themselves mourning the loss of one of cinema's most fearless performers. The silence stretched from months into years. and still no word from Julie Christie. Hollywood, a town built on publicity and self-promotion, couldn't understand how someone could simply choose invisibility over immortality. But for Julie, the choice was about something more precious than fame. It was about reclaiming her soul. While Hollywood buzzed with rumors and speculation about her whereabouts, Julie Christie had found sanctuary in the most unlikely of places, a remote farmhouse in the Welsh countryside. Not far from where she had spent her childhood, the property, accessible only by a narrow dirt road that wound through rolling hills and ancient stone walls, became her fortress against the world that had nearly destroyed her. The transformation was remarkable. The woman who had once been photographed in designer gowns at glittering premieres now spent her days in worn jeans and Wellington boots, tending to sheep and maintaining dry stone walls. She adopted rescue animals, dogs with 3 legs, cats missing eyes, horses too old to work. In caring for these wounded creatures, she seemed to be healing something in herself that fame had broken. Local residents, initially curious about their famous neighbor, quickly learned to respect her fierce need for privacy. The postmaster stopped mentioning her name. Shopkeepers declined to discuss her presence with visiting reporters, and the few who encountered her on morning walks spoke of a woman who seemed genuinely happy for the first time in years. She had traded red carpets for muddy fields, and the exchange appeared to have saved her life. But solitude brought its own challenges. Friends who attempted to visit described a woman wrestling with deep depression and anxiety. The sudden absence of the adrenaline rush that came with constant public attention had left her emotionally depleted. Some days, she wouldn't leave the house at all, wrapped in blankets and staring at the Welsh hills with eyes that held both peace and profound sadness. The few interviews she granted during this period revealed a woman fundamentally changed by her experience. She spoke of fame as a kind of madness, a collective delusion that had made her forget who she really was beneath the magazine covers and movie posters. The simplicity of her new life, making tea, reading books, watching sheep graze in fields that had remained